The streets of New York City sparkled with festive lights as Christmas morning dawned over the city that never sleeps. Snow blanketed the ground, muffling the usual hum of traffic and creating a serene, almost magical atmosphere. Storefronts displayed elaborate holiday decorations, and the faint sound of carolers echoed through the streets. Despite the cold, the warmth of the holiday spirit was palpable everywhere. For Barron, Christmas morning was usually spent with his family in quiet celebration, exchanging thoughtful gifts and enjoying a warm breakfast together. But this year, Barron had decided to do something different. At just 18 years old, he had grown increasingly aware of the privilege he was born into and felt a strong desire to give back in a meaningful way. So instead of spending the morning in the comfort of his family's home, he bundled up in a long black coat and stepped out into the chilly streets with a mission in mind. Barron carried a small, carefully wrapped gift in his hands. It wasn't anything extravagant, a simple pair of winter gloves and a woolen hat. But he had chosen it thoughtfully after an encounter a few days earlier that had left a deep impression on him. The memory was fresh in his mind as he walked toward Bryant Park, where he had met the man who inspired this gesture. It had been a cold, bustling evening when Barron noticed him sitting in a wheelchair near the park's edge, holding a small cardboard sign that read, "Merry Christmas. Anything helps." The man's name was Joe, and despite his worn clothes and weathered face, his eyes were warm and his smile genuine. Barron had stopped to talk to him that night. Drawn by something in his demeanor, Joe had lost his legs in an accident years ago and had been struggling to make ends meet ever since. Despite his challenges, he exuded a quiet strength and an optimism that Barron found humbling. Joe shared stories of his past Christmases, filled with joy and family, and spoke of his hope to one day regain that sense of belonging. As Barron reached the park, the scene before him was as picturesque as a holiday postcard. The ice skating rink in the center was alive with laughter, couples holding hands and children wobbling on skates. Vendors sold hot chocolate from small carts, their breath visible in the frosty air. And just off to the side, under the shelter of a tree, was Joe, bundled in a thin blanket and holding a steaming cup of coffee someone had given him. "Good morning, Joe." Barron greeted him warmly, crouching slightly to meet him at eye level. Joe looked up, surprised but pleased to see Barron again. "Morning, young man," he said with a smile. "Didn't expect to see you out here today. Shouldn't you be at home enjoying Christmas with your family?" Barron returned the smile. "I wanted to come by and see how you were doing. Merry Christmas." Joe chuckled. "Merry Christmas to you too. It's been a good morning so far. Someone gave me this coffee, and the skating rink's always nice to watch. Brings back good memories." Barron nodded, glancing at the rink before turning back to Joe. "I brought you something," he said, holding out the small gift. Joe's eyes widened in surprise. "For me?" he asked, his voice touched with disbelief. "Of course," Barron said. "It's not much, but I thought it might help keep you warm out here." Joe hesitated for a moment, then carefully unwrapped the gift. When he saw the gloves and hat, his face lit up with gratitude. This is wonderful," he said, slipping the gloves onto his hands. "They're perfect. Thank you." Barron noticed a slight tremble in Joe's voice and felt a pang of emotion. "You're welcome," he said softly. "It's the least I could do." For a moment, the two sat in companionable silence, watching the skaters glide across the ice. Finally, Joe broke the quiet. "You know," he said, "a lot of people walk by me every day, but not many stop to talk, let alone bring me something like this. It means more than you know." "It's not just about the gift," Barron replied. "It's about reminding each other that we're not invisible. Everyone deserves to be seen." Joe nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's a good way to put it. I'll remember that." As their conversation continued, Barron learned more about Joe's life. His dreams of becoming a teacher before the accident, his love for painting, and his gratitude for the small acts of kindness that had sustained him over the years. It was a reminder to Barron of how resilient people could be, even in the face of unimaginable challenges. But their interaction didn't go unnoticed. Nearby, a woman sitting on a bench watched the scene unfold with quiet interest. She had been taking pictures of the park, capturing the holiday spirit for a local charity's website. Moved by the sight of Barron talking to Joe, she discreetly snapped a photo of the moment, intending to share it as an example of compassion during the holiday season. As Barron rose to leave, he placed a hand on Joe's shoulder. "Take care of yourself, Joe. And if you ever need anything, I'll be around." Joe smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Thank you, Barron. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," Barron replied before walking away, his heart full. What neither of them knew at that moment was that the woman's photo would soon go viral. Titled "A Christmas Act of Kindness," the image captured Barron kneeling beside Joe, their expressions warm and genuine. It quickly became a symbol of the holiday spirit, spreading across social media and sparking conversations about the importance of compassion and giving back. By the next morning, the photograph of Barron Trump kneeling beside Joe had taken the internet by storm. It was shared thousands of times, accompanied by captions like "kindness in action" and "the spirit of Christmas lives on." People across the globe were moved by the simplicity of the gesture. A young man stepping out of his privileged world to connect with someone who had been forgotten by society. Barron, however, was oblivious to the online buzz. For him, the interaction with Joe wasn't about making headlines. It was simply the right thing to do. He had returned home that Christmas morning feeling a sense of fulfillment, knowing he had brought even a little warmth to someone's life. Meanwhile, the story continued to grow. The woman who had captured the photo, a local journalist named Rachel Meyer, decided to write a heartfelt article about the moment. In her piece, she described the tenderness in Barron's actions, the way he had spoken to Joe as an equal, and the genuine gratitude on Joe's face. Her words painted a vivid picture of hope and humanity, and the article quickly gained traction. Later that day, Barron's phone buzzed with a call from his mother, Melania. Her voice carried a mix of amusement and pride. "Barron," she said, "have you seen the news?" He frowned slightly. "No, why?" "Your Christmas visit to the park has touched a lot of hearts," she said warmly. "People are talking about it everywhere." Barron paused, unsure how to respond. "I wasn't trying to get attention," he said finally. "I just wanted to help Joe." "I know," Melania replied. "And that's exactly why it's resonating with so many people. It's a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can inspire others." Barron thanked her and hung up, but the conversation left him thoughtful. As the day went on, he received more messages, some from friends, others from strangers who had read the story or seen the photo. Many shared their own experiences of helping others or being inspired to do so after seeing what he had done. One message, however, stood out. It was from a local nonprofit organization that worked with people experiencing homelessness. The director, a man named Peter, wrote, "Barron, your kindness to Joe has reminded people of the humanity we often overlook in our daily lives. If you're interested, we'd love to invite you to visit our shelter and meet others who could use a little hope this holiday season." Intrigued, Barron agreed. 2 days later, he found himself standing outside the shelter, a modest but welcoming building decorated with handmade Christmas ornaments. Inside, he met Peter, who introduced him to the staff and residents. The shelter was bustling with activity, volunteers serving hot meals, children playing with donated toys, and adults chatting over cups of coffee. As Barron moved through the room, he was struck by the resilience and warmth of the people he met. Many shared their stories of hardships endured, dreams deferred, and small victories celebrated. It reminded him of Joe's quiet strength and deepened his appreciation for the importance of community and compassion. By the time Barron left the shelter, he had made a decision. He didn't want his interaction with Joe to be just a fleeting moment. He wanted to do more, to create lasting change for people like Joe and the residents of the shelter. With the help of Peter and the nonprofit, he began planning an initiative to provide winter supplies, meals, and long-term support for individuals experiencing homelessness. Barron's collaboration with the nonprofit organization quickly gained momentum. Inspired by his interaction with Joe and his visit to the shelter, Barron decided to launch an initiative called Warm Hearts, Warm Hands, a campaign dedicated to providing winter essentials, meals, and resources for people experiencing homelessness across New York City. The initiative began with a simple goal: to distribute care packages containing gloves, hats, scarves, socks, and blankets to those in need. Barron personally funded the first round of packages, ensuring each one included a handwritten note that read, "You are seen, you are valued, and you are not alone." Barron. The response was overwhelming. Within days of announcing the initiative, donations poured in from all over the country. People from every walk of life wanted to contribute, inspired by the viral photo of Barron and Joe. Schools organized donation drives, businesses offered sponsorships, and families came together to assemble care packages in their living rooms. But Barron wasn't content to simply oversee the campaign from a distance. He was on the ground, helping to pack and distribute the packages himself. Alongside volunteers from the nonprofit, he visited shelters, parks, and street corners, personally handing out the care packages and taking the time to talk to each person he met. For Barron, it wasn't just about providing material support. It was about restoring dignity and connection. One chilly evening, Barron returned to Bryant Park, where he found Joe sitting under the same tree as before. This time, however, Joe's demeanor was lighter, his face filled with a sense of renewed hope. When he saw Barron, he broke into a wide grin. "Barron," Joe exclaimed, wheeling himself over. "You're back." "Of course," Barron said, kneeling down to meet him at eye level. "How are you doing, Joe?" Joe laughed softly. "Better than I've been in years. You wouldn't believe the number of people who've come up to me since that photo went viral. Some have offered help. Others just stopped to chat. It's like I've gone from invisible to seen overnight." Barron smiled. "That's what this is all about, Joe. No one should feel invisible." Joe nodded, his expression turning serious. "But you didn't just change things for me, Barron. You've sparked something bigger. People are paying attention now. They're realizing that we're all human, and we all deserve kindness." As they talked, Joe shared how the small gift Barron had given him, the gloves and hat, had become a symbol of something much greater. "It wasn't just about staying warm," Joe said. "It reminded me that there are still good people in the world, that someone cares." Barron felt a wave of emotion at Joe's words. "You inspired me just as much, Joe," he said. "This whole campaign started because of you." Joe's eyes widened. "The campaign? You mean all those care packages I've been hearing about?" Barron nodded. "Yeah, I thought if one small gesture could make a difference for you, maybe it could do the same for others." Joe's face lit up with pride. "Well, you've done more than that, Barron. You've given people hope." As the holiday season progressed, Warm Hearts, Warm Hands continued to grow. The campaign expanded to include job training programs, mental health resources, and long-term housing support for those in need. Barron worked closely with the nonprofit to ensure the initiative addressed not just immediate needs, but also the root causes of homelessness. One of the most memorable moments came on New Year's Eve, when the nonprofit organized a special dinner for the residents of its shelters. The event was held in a large community center, transformed into a festive space with twinkling lights, cheerful decorations, and tables laden with hot meals. Barron attended as a guest of honor, but spent most of the evening serving food, chatting with families, and listening to their stories. Joe was also invited to the dinner, and when he arrived, the room erupted into applause. Barron introduced him to the crowd as the person who had inspired the entire campaign, and Joe's eyes glistened with tears as he addressed the audience. "I never thought I'd see a night like this," Joe said, his voice trembling with emotion. "For so long, I felt like I didn't matter, like I was just another face people walked past. But this young man reminded me and all of us that we do matter, that we're worth something. And tonight, I see that kindness really can change the world." The room stood in a standing ovation, and Barron couldn't help but feel humbled by the moment. It wasn't about him. It was about the people whose lives were being touched, the connections being made, and the hope that was spreading like wildfire. As the evening wound down, Barron stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The city skyline sparkled in the distance, and the crisp winter air carried the faint sound of laughter from the community center. He thought about how a simple decision to stop and talk to Joe had led to something so much bigger than he could have imagined. Just then, Peter, the director of the nonprofit, joined him outside. "You've done something incredible here, Barron," Peter said, his voice filled with admiration. "But what I find most remarkable is that you didn't do this for attention or accolades. You did it because you care." Barron looked at him thoughtfully. "The truth is, Peter, I've learned more from Joe and the people I've met through this campaign than they'll ever learn from me. Kindness isn't just about giving, it's about connecting. And I think that's what we're all really searching for." Peter nodded, smiling. "Well, you've reminded a lot of people of that. And I think this is just the beginning." As the clock neared midnight, Barron returned to the community center to join the countdown to the new year. Surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by the campaign, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He knew the work was far from over, but he was ready to continue, one small act of kindness at a time. When the clock struck midnight, cheers erupted, and the room filled with hugs, laughter, and hope. For Barron, it wasn't just the start of a new year. It was the start of a renewed commitment to making a difference. And as he looked around at the smiling faces, he realized that kindness truly had the power to restore faith in humanity.